Hey, this is Dani, you and me, Living Free, and I'm so glad you're here today. I want to do a video on if I were just starting van life and these handful of really important things that we consider, and I'm just going to give you my 2 cents and maybe a take on how you can look at, because there's no one solution for everybody, right? A minivan isn't right for everybody. The kind of toilet I use isn't right for everybody. The kind of bed and the size of bed I use isn't right for everybody. I use a cooler. Some people need, but I'm going to tell you how to kind of think through the decision that in a way that might help you, because these are things that I couldn't figure out before I actually started van life. Sometimes because you just don't know, and sometimes because you don't honestly know. Sometimes you don't really know your preferences. Like for example, let's start with the vehicle. I thought it was going to bother me a lot that I couldn't stand up in my minivan. But what I found is, and I'm a big girl, I'm 5'9", and I have a big frame and a big body, and I was like, this minivan is not going to be big enough. But what it came down to was money. How much money did I want to give? And every 1,000 or even every 100 extra that I gave on the vehicle made less money for me to travel, less time away from work, was more constricted. So I thought, here's my number 1 tip, my first tip, start with the least amount of vehicle that you think you might need. The least amount of van, the least amount of space, everything that you think you might be able to get by with. Because I'm going to tell you what, if I were living in this van full time, I would definitely want to stand up. But what I found traveling for almost a year and a half in my van, in and out, trips back and forth to Kansas City, being out on the road most of the time, is it did not bother me not being able to stand up. And I thought that was going to be my number 1 thing. The reason it didn't bother me is because I don't sit around in the van like I sit around in my house. I am out in nature. I'm out doing hikes. I'm sitting outside having breakfast. It's not as confining because I'm not spending as much time in it. So that's not really as important to me. So I would say this: when you get out on the road and you're meeting a bunch of van lifers, they are just as likely to be downsizing as they are upsizing. And what that means is just all kinds of people start out with something and then realize they can get by on a lot less. So if you just start at kind of the bottom of your budget instead of the top, then you have more freedom. Plus, I bought a Toyota Sienna. My thinking was, if I don't like this van life, or if a minivan is too small and I have to get something bigger, then I can trade a Sienna. I can sell a Sienna easily because the market's going to be there. The demand is going to be there. It holds its value, right? So that was my thinking. That might help you think through your vehicle, because another theme that's going to run through this a lot is you don't really know until you get out there. You don't really know. You can think you have it all figured out. Maybe you're one of those people who can have it all figured out and do it right perfectly the first time. But I don't know anybody like that. I don't know anybody whose van isn't in more of an evolutionary stage. At most times, they have things they would do differently if they started again. So I'm just trying to set you up in the best possible way. So that's another thing, is to not buy anything until you need it. I have a pile of stuff that it's too late to send back to Amazon, and it has no real value for a lot of other people. So I'm donating it because it's not garage sale season or anything. So I'm just going to donate a lot of this little stuff. And I bought a ton of things I don't need. I think many of us in van life do this. We get excited at first, especially a little buddy heater, for example. I don't need a little buddy heater. I turn on my heat in my van if I get super cold, but otherwise I just have a great system for sleeping, and I don't get cold. I have a little down blanket. I have a Sherpa blanket, and I'm fine up to maybe 20 degrees or so, maybe even in the teens or 20 degrees. And colder than that, I'm moving. I'm going to take my little van and I'm going to move somewhere warmer, because I do not do van life so that I can freeze my butt off. Now, some people do van life because they're going to live in their van and they're going to work, and they might be in Buffalo, New York or something. They might be somewhere really cold and they have to figure it out. I don't. I was traveling in my van for fun and everything, I'm not going to be somewhere that's that cold. Anyway, also the little buddy it requires too much space and too much stability, much more than I had in the van. So that's the second thing. Don't buy anything unless you need it, unless you're really, really convinced that you do need it. So once you have your vehicle, you plan for your vehicle and everything, then you want to think about the layout of your space, planning your bed in your kitchen, and where they're going to go is two of the biggest things. Now, I have seen so many cool kitchen designs where they have the kitchen out the back. It's so fun. They can put up these cabinets and have everything that they need right there and cook out the back. But what you don't see is, what if you're up in Minnesota in the summertime next to a lake and there are so many flies and there are so many mosquitoes and there are so many gnats that the last thing you honestly want to do is to open up the back of your van to all of that and to cook. So I wanted to be able to cook inside my van for rainy days, for when there's too many insects and stuff like that. So I have a system where my kitchen is not out the back. You have to decide, do you want your kitchen out the back or do you want it inside? Some people have enough space they can kind of do both. That was a big thing for me. Also the bed. I started out with a cot. I would say start with a cot if you want to, but I was too big a girl and I needed a solid framed bed. And so the cot only worked on like my first trip and it was okay, but then I knew I needed a bed, okay? And so I had to make it, and it's just plywood and 2x4s, and I have a video on how I made the bed and everything and that whole thing. So you can find that in my videos. So that's it. Think about the general layout. For example, I'm very tall. I wanted storage in the back, so I had to put my bed on the passenger side, because when my bed is where I want it, the seat back has to be almost all the way forward. Well, like I said, I'm tall, so my seat when I drive is actually all the way back, so I couldn't fit my bed on the same side. So think through your layout, and I would say honestly, get a sheet of paper, do the exact dimensions, do cutouts of how you want everything, and play with everything like that a little bit. Also, I didn't put in anything permanent in my van. I have plastic storage bins and things like that. Everything's removable. Everything is kind of on this system where I can add to it and take away, and it's cheap and it's easy, and all my storage bins are clear, so I can always see what's in them. So I have a van tour. I'll link it in the description if you want to see that. I have a very organized space for me. Okay, what else is there? So on your vehicle, start at the low end, not the high end. On your don't buy anything unless you really need it, and you don't know you need it till you're really kind of out there. Number 3 is think through your layout and really do kind of a spec and think about how you live and how you move and how you want to do things to get your layout right. The big thing is power, and everybody's like, how big a Jackery? I have a Jackery, but how big a power source do you need? And I'm going to kind of give you this general thing from a person who has no technical expertise whatsoever. This is just like a lay person just completely deciding. All I have is a Jackery. I have a Jackery 240, okay? That 240 will run my computer, my cell phone, my Kindle, my Fitbit, my electric toothbrush, a little mini electric blanket if I need it for that cold stuff. I have like a little heating pad. It'll run all the basics. It'll recharge my little, a couple of my little rechargeable things like my lamp and other things. So the 240 is plenty for all of that, plenty. And even if I don't have power, I have a 240, and then I have 2 solar, like expandable travel solar things, and that is plenty for me. and I don't even need that much sunshine or that much travel, and that works fine for me. The other thing on power source though is how are you going to refrigerate your food? I have a cooler. This is the next big decision. When you're thinking about power, you're going to have to decide about how you're going to cool your food. I have met people who travel with no refrigeration and they do just fine. I have met people who have really nice refrigerators. They need a freezer in there and everything. They have the whole deal. That's fine too. But for me, here's the deal. You have to think about how you travel. So a cooler works fine and it takes up about the same space as a small refrigerator. So those are kind of interchangeable. Now, when I was first traveling, there were so many things I wanted to see that I would move every few days. I wouldn't be in one spot for 2 weeks at a time. I would be moving. So it was okay for me to have to go buy ice to put in the cooler every few days because it wasn't that big of a deal. Ice is generally pretty cheap most places, unless you're in California. Ice is pretty cheap. So it didn't seem like that big of a deal, okay? Now, I can tell you, toward the end of my travel, I was getting to places where I wanted to stay a couple weeks in one place. And then having to go get ice was a terrible pain in the butt. It was a terrible pain. I didn't want to break down everything and drive to town just to get ice. And if I had my friends, they were like, one of my friends is going to town and they would go to town and then they didn't have a cooler or whatever, they couldn't fit in their cooler, then they're driving back with my ice and it's a bag half melted. If I had to do it over again, I would just start out with a refrigerator. But what it means though, if you have a refrigerator, you have to have a bigger power source. So from what I have gathered from my friends who have them, from traveling really close with many people, what I've seen is the small, like Alpacool, for example, the small fridges that are like the 250 or 300 or whatever that is, the small basic kind of Alpacool is going to take a 240 Jackery all by itself. And that needs to be like, you can turn it off for a few hours a day in like the middle of the night if it's cool or something, and then turn it back on the next day. It's going to take a whole 240 by itself. Therefore, getting a refrigerator and a Jackery for that would mean doubling my power source. And so it's going to be an investment of about $500 or $600. But the next time I'm ready to go out, I'm definitely going to go that route. So when you're thinking through refrigeration and power, think about how you travel. Are you going to be close to an ice source most of the time? Are you going to want ice in your drinks? Because I do. I like ice in my drinks. That's another reason that I went with the cooler, because a lot of the smaller fridges are just all fridge and you don't really have an ice place, and I couldn't like make ice. I love having ice in my drinks. That's another reason I would go with the cooler. But like I said, for the kind of travel I want to do now, which is more get to a place, stay for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or in a general area, you know, I would really like to not have to leave and get ice. So I would do a cooler. I would make the investment. I would probably get a little Alpacool, and I would get another Jackery, and I would probably get another Jackery 240. Although if I could afford it, I'd probably go ahead and get I'd get a 500 instead, because I'd rather have too much power than not enough. And if you're out in the desert in southern Arizona, you're probably fine to refill your batteries with the solar power all the time. But if you like the Pacific Northwest, or if you are somewhere with lots of trees and things like that, then you're not always going to be able to charge those batteries. So then it's going to be a really good idea to you know, to have that extra power, to have a little in the bank so that you can use it. So what else are my keys? Let me consult my notes and I'll be right back. Okay, one more thing I'm going to bring up and then we'll be done, and that is Do you need a curtain across here? Okay, and I'm bringing this up because I watched so many videos on how to make a curtain and how to make the rod and how to keep it in and everything. I tried so many things, and I'm not crafty at all. I'm not even going to tell you how many things I tried. I'm not even going to tell you how many videos I watched. I'm not even going to tell you how much frustration I had. And then I finally realized this. Everyone acts like you have to have the curtain. For me, the curtain was a pain, even when I did get a system that kind of worked. Then you've got these big heavy curtains that are over to the side and they're in the way, and the rod is full length. So I would bump my head when getting front and back, because that's another thing. I wanted, in my layout, I wanted to be able to, as a solo female traveler, I wanted to be able to move from front to back without anyone outside knowing, or without, you know, having to get in and out of the van. So I removed my console here that was in between the front seats, and I can get back and forth. I would always hit my head on the rod. It was a pain, and I spent a lot of time on it. So what I'm going to say is this. I have had better luck. I made the window coverings, which is another big thing in van life, but it's something you don't have to decide right away. I did the Reflectix with black on one side, silver on the other. So with my Reflectix, I made window coverings for my front two windows, driver and passenger windows. This is important because I hardly see anyone in van life who has done this, but I don't know why, because there's a lot of heat that gets in. And even if you have a curtain and you're trying to keep your van cool, you're much better off to try to keep this front end cool too, and have a front window covering, which you can just buy a screen for that. But I made custom window coverings for the driver and the passenger side. I'm so glad they did. Do yourself a favor and do this. And then I didn't ever need a curtain because my whole van was enclosed and was private, and I didn't have to have a curtain, and I didn't have to, you know, advertise that there was some, you know, someone back there or whatever. Everything was covered. So that's the other thing I want to mention. And I really think that's it. So think about what you need and go toward the lower end so you have some wiggle room. If you're on a budget at all, if you're not, hey, go for it. Get the Sprinter first thing off the bat, whatever, you know, or your Winnebago Travato, or whatever your dream is, go for it if you don't have a budget. But if you're on a budget, go for the small end, and knowing that you can move up. And it's easier, I think, to move up than to move down. And then don't buy things till you need them. And then think through your layout and your bed and how you want to cook and everything, because that will determine a lot. And then think about how you're going to refrigerate your food and cook. And that determines a lot of your power needs, because power is going to be a big thing. Also, get the window coverings all around. Do yourself a favor. Also, with the window coverings is like, there are so many times where I'm just in a parking lot in the middle of the afternoon. Maybe I'm sitting in a Starbucks parking lot or something, or just sitting in my van working, and the sun is shining through. I use those window coverings in the front. They're almost even more valuable than in the back. And I don't know why nobody talks about that. But anyway, do yourself a favor and do that. And I think that's it. I think this video could help someone. If you know someone who needs to see it, then please share it. Please like and subscribe. And I'll talk to you soon. I want to send you a ton of love. If you are here to the end, let me know in the comments you stayed till the end. Love seeing it. You deserve a medal. And I want to give an extra thanks to my patrons on Patreon. My link is in the description. For as little as $3 a month, you too can join us for all the fun on Patreon and all the behind the scenes stuff and different things like that. Plus, it's just a way, if you want to communicate, if you want to chat with me or ask questions that aren't, you know, posted live on the board or whatever on YouTube. So we can just have a little more connection on Patreon. Anyway, thank you to my patrons. I love you. I appreciate the support. And I hope this does somebody some good. Thanks. Have a great day. See you next time.